Week 7 going into the Minnesota Vikings bye week, they came off of an awful performance against the Atlanta Falcons. And I said, I do not think the Vikings can make the playoffs. They are not competing for a playoff berth at this point because of how Kirk Cousins is playing. With Dalvin Cook having an amazing 2 games, and then the Minnesota Vikings coming in huge, the defense coming in huge against the Chicago Bears, the Minnesota Vikings are now 4-5 and can compete for a playoff. And I really think the Vikings will get to the playoffs as a 6th or a 7th seed. And we'll be talking about this because they are coming off of 3 straight divisional games, which they needed if they wanted to make the playoffs. Can the Vikings compete for the division? No. Can they compete for the Super Bowl? No. But they can make the playoffs, which really you don't care. I mean, if you're just making the playoffs and maybe being one and done again or going out right away, still, I do think the Vikings will make the playoffs, and we'll be talking about this on this episode, why I do think the Vikings will make the playoffs. Last week, I talked about best case scenario for the Minnesota Vikings. I said best case scenario is that the Vikings go 9-7. Of course, they are 4-5 right now, so that would be 5-2 going forward. I don't expect the Vikings to, of course, you would say best case scenario would be 11-5 at this point, but they would have to win all their next games. It's not going to happen. I'll tell you right now, it's not going to happen because of how the Vikings defense is looking. They don't have that cornerback position locked down, and they're always injured. Kirk Cousins, you can't rely on him to win you all of the games in the world. He can win you some games, but you can't rely on him to be a consistent quarterback to keep winning you games. Dalvin Cook, of course, one top 3 running back in the league, in my opinion, is the best running back in the league. But when you play a tougher defense, like how we saw against the Chicago Bears, they can hold him to under 4 yards a carry, and the Minnesota Vikings offense is not looking nearly as good as they should be. In the NFC South right now, there's 2 teams playing for the NFC South. That is going to be the New Orleans Saints and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Both teams we play going forward, but both of them are going to make the playoffs. I will say that right now. One of them will make the playoffs, of course, win the division. The other one will be a 5 seed. And then the Minnesota Vikings, I think, can get that 6th or 7th seed, but it's really going to depend on how the NFC West looks. Right now, the NFC West, and we knew this going into the season, by far the best division in the NFL because all 4 teams are good. All 4 teams can make the playoffs right now. You have of course, the Seattle Seahawks, you have the LA Rams and the Cardinals, and then the 49ers. All of those teams can make the playoffs. The 49ers, I'm going to count them out at this point because of the injuries that they are suffering with. I do not think the 49ers at all can compete for a Super Bowl or compete for a playoff berth, especially coming out of that division. We're going to rule the 49ers out right here and say it's between Cardinals, Seahawks, and Rams. 2 out of 3 of those teams need to go to the playoffs for the Vikings to make the playoffs. But first of all, Vikings got to win a lot of their next games, especially those divisional wins. Vikings have got to get those divisional wins so they can get those tiebreakers, and that will get us to the playoffs. I don't think Chicago Bears are going to be above 500 this year. I do not think Chicago Bears are going to be above 500 this year, and for that reason, Vikings, I do think, can get to that playoff berth, be 2nd in the division, and possibly go 5-1 in the division. I think Vikings can go 5-1 in the division at this point. All they have to do is beat the Lions again and beat the Bears again. Vikings will be 5-1 in the division, and that could be a tiebreaker going to the playoffs. So right now, the Cardinals, Rams, and Seahawks are all tied in the NFC West. They're going to beat each other up. These 3 teams are so good, and you can't really count the 49ers out, but I am. These 3 teams in this division are just going to beat each other up, and they're not going to, and I don't think all 3 of them can make it out. If you're in such a hard division like this, you have so many divisional games that you're going to lose, and it's going to ruin your season. One of these teams is going to lose one divisional game, and it's going to ruin the season. We don't want that to be the Seahawks, because if the Vikings have already lost to the Seahawks. If the Vikings and Seahawks are both tied, Seahawks win the tiebreaker, and they will make the playoffs instead. We have to cheer for the Seahawks to win the division at this point. We want the Seahawks to win the division because we don't want that tiebreaker to ruin the Viking season. It's between Cardinals and Rams. We need to cheer against the Cardinals and the Rams. We need one of those teams or both of those teams to fall apart the rest of the season for the Vikings to make it to the playoffs. Of course, first of all, we need the Vikings to do their part, which is winning all their easy games. We have the Jaguars coming up, the Cowboys, we have the Panthers, we have the Lions again, Bears again. We have so many easy games coming up, and all we need the Vikings to do is win those easy games. Even if they lose to both the Saints and the Buccaneers, which are their tough matchups going forward, even if they lose to both of those teams, or even the Bears again, they can make the playoffs still. They can still make the playoffs. But they gotta win those easy games. That's it. All the Vikings got to do is win the easy games, and then we need one of these teams to fall apart, which I will tell you right now, it will happen. Because when you have a division that is this tough and all the teams are this good, they're going to beat each other up. There's too many divisional games, and they're going to beat themselves up, and 1 or 2 of them is going to fall apart. And we hope that's not the Seahawks. Because if the Seahawks get the tiebreaker against the Minnesota Vikings, we got to cheer against the Rams and Cardinals, which both right now can really fall apart. They both can fall apart. And I do think the Vikings are going to make the playoffs because I think the Vikings right now, coming off of those 3 wins, they're hot. They are hot. That defense is looking so much better than they looked the first 5 games of the season. First 6 games of the season, I mean. They're looking so much better than they looked the first 6 games of the season. And our offense is complete. Of course, Kirk Cousins, we need him to just play okay. All we need is an okay game from Kirk Cousins because he cannot be in a better scenario. This Vikings offensive line is looking better than it's looked the last 5 years. Dalvin Cook, best running back in the league. CJ Ham, best fullback in the league. And then he has 2 amazing wide receivers and 2 great tight ends. 3 great tight ends, actually. And then Chad Beebe in the slot. You cannot give Kirk Cousins more than he already has. And for this reason, the Vikings got to win these easy games. I don't see them losing a lot of these games. Of course, it really does come down to the defense. The defense won us the game against the Chicago Bears. And it really does come down to this Minnesota Vikings defense. All we need them to do is not give up more than 30 points. Keep teams under 30 points, and we hope we can look good against them. Anyways, that's me not expecting much from this Vikings defense. Anyways, Minnesota Vikings can make the playoffs. Right now, they're 4-5 and 3rd in the division. With these games going forward, they have an easy schedule going forward. Chicago Bears have a hard schedule going forward. Vikings will end the season 2nd in the division, and they will make the playoffs. But with that, we need the Rams to fall apart or the Cardinals to fall apart. And it will happen. The NFC West is going to beat themselves up. Rams, Cardinals, Seahawks, they're all 6-3 right now. One of those teams are going to fall apart because they're going to beat themselves up, and that's going to be very helpful for the Vikings, and they will get to the playoffs. They will clinch a playoff berth. It will be a 6th or 7th seed, and it's going to be very hard for the Vikings to get to the Super Bowl to the point where the Vikings aren't even competing for the Super Bowl. So is it a huge accomplishment making the playoffs? No. But might as well at this point. I mean, they won 3 straight divisional games. It's looking promising. This Vikings offense is hot. This defense is looking better than they've looked the entire season. They can make the playoffs. All we need to do is win these easy games and one of these teams to fall apart. And it's going to happen. Let me know what y'all think.